It's 5:15. We have a quorum. So I'll call the meeting to order. And I understand that Commissioner Peterson was going to join us remotely. Oh, he's on? Okay.
He's on.
Okay. So what we need to do then is have a roll call. So, Mark, do you want to call the roll? Here.
Present. Say here.
Just so you're aware, I'm hearing Bob, but nobody else.
Please remember to turn on your microphones when we do roll call.
Commissioner Peterson?
I am here.
Okay, we have 6 commissioners present. The first item on the agenda is the Commissioner Oath of Office.
Thank you. I, Cynthia Hunt, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the State of Minnesota and faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of the Port Authority of the City of Bloomington in the County of Hennepin and State of Minnesota to the best of my judgment and ability.
And Commissioner Hunt, we're very happy that you are continuing on and providing your sage advice on many things, so we will look forward to your continued participation.
Thank you.
The next item is introduction of a new employee.
All right. Good evening, commissioners. Warsan, would you like to come join us at the podium? Warsan Artan is our new Bloom facilitator. It's a temporary 1-year position here with the port. I'm going to read a brief bio and then let her introduce herself. Warsan is a dedicated advocate for community development, youth empowerment, and equitable policy change. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in biology from San Diego State University, where she discovered her passion for political engagement and youth leadership through her role in Associated Students Government. Warsan's professional journey includes over 3 years with YouthWill, a youth-led organization in San Diego focused on creating a region where young people can thrive. She also served as a co-vice chair of San Diego County's Human Relations Commission, where she championed initiatives to address systematic disparities. Warsan has contributed to community empowerment efforts as a member of Kafamad Collective, a Minneapolis-based initiative supporting Somali women's mental health, and as a board member of the Global Action Research Center, ensuring underrepresented communities are part of transformative research and dialogue. In 2024, Warsan completed her Master of Public Policy at UC San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy, specializing in program design and evaluation and American and comparative business regulation. She is the first woman in her family to achieve this milestone and brings an analytical and data-informed approach to her work in community advocacy and policy development. She is now based in Burnsville, and a fun fact is that she loves exploring the outdoors and spends her free time enjoying parks, lakes, and hiking trails. Welcome.
Well, welcome, and I had the pleasure of meeting you at a Rotary meeting, and you did a very nice job presenting, and so it's good to see you again.
Is this on? Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. As you, again, know, I will be overseeing our Bloom in Bloomington program, and as somebody who has worked with young people since I was in high school, honestly, I tutored middle schoolers when I was in high school and continued tutoring high school and college students when I was in college. And then after that, I worked with a youth organization, so I feel like working with young people is a lifelong journey for me, and I love working with them because they're very creative, smart, innovative individuals. So I look forward to working with the young people and our employer partners, as well as all our partners all around in our program in contributing to the city of Bloomington. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and welcome.
Welcome.
So the next item on the agenda is the appointment of officers. It's on 1.3. So we have the incumbents listed there, and I guess we need somebody to make a motion, suggest new people, whatever the commissioners would like to do.
I think, well, I want to make a prefatory comment. I
believe in the past it may appear that we've been somewhat pro forma in doing this, and I don't think any of us have intended to do that. I think we vote for people who we believe should do the jobs and have done a great job and brought that with us. So I'm going to move the current slate of the people. If it's not, am I premature for motions?
No, it's perfect for a motion if you want to make it.
I would move that the current occupants of our offices retain those offices with just one comment, which is we need to be cautious about making sure that we've planned for the future and transitions as many of us continue to berinkle as time moves on, and the benefit of our long tenure, as noted in the presentation that we're going to get later, is, I think, a real thing. But I hate to have it all disappear simultaneously through the active time. So we really need to think about broadening our participation both in the commission in general and I believe in the officer ranks. So, but for the moment, I move that we retain the current slate of officers with names and titles pertinent thereto. And back to you, Mr. President.
Do we have a second?
Don't everybody talk at once.
Second.
Did Commissioner Hunt second? I'm sorry. All right. All right, we have a motion made and seconded. I think we now need to do a roll call. And I should note for the record that Commissioner Nelson just has joined us.
And if I could, Mr. President?
Yes.
I would agree with Commissioner Keller that we just need to make sure that as we move forward with our discussions and any of the work that we're doing, that we make it as broad a tent as possible as we do our discussions, as we do the conversations, as we make put our heads together with staff and with other council, with other commission members to try and figure this out, to make sure that it's as broad as possible within the commission here, so that as we wrinkle, we all do, that there's that additional knowledge, there's that additional understanding, there's that additional appreciation of the work, that institutional knowledge as we do move forward with any number of things that we do, that it's as broad and as wide as possible, because the berinkling is certainly happening. We want to make sure that we have a plan and a path forward, so that we're ready to move forward for the next generations and as we move forward in Bloomington.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? If not, let's call the roll.
Erickson,
Yes.
Bussey,
Aye.
Hunt, Nelson, Lunds,
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. The next item then is the approval of minutes. We have two different sets of minutes. We have one set of minutes for the last meeting that we had. So I would entertain a motion for the approval of those.
Question. Call to order. Port Authority Commissioner members present. Last one's Commissioner Peterson. Port Authority Commissioner members absent. The last one's Commissioner Peterson. Steve's good, but I don't think he can be in two places at once.
Thanks, Rob. I was going to point the same thing out.
All right.
Sure you were.
Okay, well, with that correction, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the
Well,
minutes.
Don't we know what? I can't remember. Was he here? Was Steve here or not?
He was going to, were you here, Commissioner Peterson?
I was not at that meeting, so.
Okay.
The
All right,
correct change here is to delete.
all right. Then,
If I could just bring, I think Commissioner Lenz, I think you're speaking to item 2.2, the approval of the concurrent Port Authority HRA City Council meeting,
Oh, I'm on the wrong one.
as opposed to item 2.1, the approval of the Port Authority meeting minutes from February, or from December.
You're correct. I jumped the gun.
I just want to make sure that we're voting on the correct thing here and noting you are correct, but I think we were talking about item 2.2 there.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that correction. So as we are now corrected and we're certain that we're meeting on the meeting for December 10th, I believe Commissioner Luntz made a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Hunt. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please, we have to do the roll call again. All right.
Erickson,
All right. Yes.
Bussey,
I,
Hunt, Nelson, Lunds,
Aye.
Keller,
Abstain for lack of attendance.
pardon,
I wasn't there.
Peterson.
Aye.
Motion carries 6 with 1 exception. Okay, next item then is we have some concurrent minutes that are also attached, so I will attain, and that meeting also was on December 10th.
Mr. President, I would move approval of the concurrent Port Authority HRA City Council meeting from December 10th, acknowledging that Commissioner Peterson, though incredibly talented and flexible, could not be there and not there at the same time. He, in fact, was not present at the meeting.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Nelson. Any further additions or corrections? If not, please call the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Bussey,
Aye.
Hunt, Nelson, Lunds,
Aye.
Keller,
Again, wasn't there, so I.
Peterson.
And I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
Motion carries 5-0 with 2 abstentions. Okay, we are then on to something that we haven't done here before, but I think it's a practical way to handle these things. We have a lot of things that need to be approved. Appointment of official newspaper, designation of official depositories, and I know on that one that Commissioner Hunt usually abstains, and I think if Commissioner Hunt is okay, what we can do is just note that she's abstaining. If we have one motion, that she's abstaining with respect to the depositories. Electronic funds transfer, external auditor, municipal auditor, financial management policies, and then the alpha B Estoppel certificates. So would any commissioner like any one of these to be voted on separately? If not, I would entertain a motion then for all the items in the consent agenda. And we can note, if it's okay with Commissioner Hunt, that she would be abstaining with respect to item 3.2.
Mr. President, I would move approval of the consent business as stated.
Motion made by Commissioner Bussey. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Luntz. Martin, you want to call the roll?
Erickson,
Aye.
Bussey,
Aye.
Hunt, Nelson, Lunds,
Aye.
Keller, Peterson.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. And please note again that Commissioner Hunt recused herself on 3.2. Okay, the next item then, as we get into more that we have to, well, I guess we actually got a presentation here. So item 4.1. And what I just want to comment on as we get into this, this is a very long agenda, and I was talking with Holly about it yesterday. I think one of the most important things we get into is actually at the end, it's item 5.4, which is our Port Authority work plan. And if Holly is comfortable, if we're in a situation where we don't feel that we've really had time to talk about this and look at it, we can easily bring that back to the next meeting. So again, I think simply because of the nature of it, we have so many things, this is probably the time when we have the best overview of what we're expecting staff to do. And so I think if we have anything on that, and I think one of the things that could come up in the discussion is really, when we have a work plan like this, how do we measure how it's going? I mean, what items do we have? So with that said, welcome.
Thank you. And while we're pulling up the presentation, so this is a agenda topic about the grocery space at Carbon 31. And my name's Kevin Canese, Assistant Port Commissioner. And the intention for this presentation is to give you an overview of potential updates to the terms of a recapture agreement related to that grocery space. The hope is that if there is approval for those terms, that will allow McGuff, the developer, to negotiate with a tenant based on those terms to execute a lease.
Kevin, excuse me, could I ask you the favor? Could you get into the mic a bit more? Just
Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
Thank
Is that better? Let's see if I can get this clicker to work. Do you want to maybe just go to the next slide? Sorry about that. Maybe. Nope, but it worked. Okay. So quick overview here. So Carbon 31 is the newest apartment building to open at Bloomington Central Station. You can see it here on this slide. The grocery space is 14,500 square feet of the building, and there are 402 units of apartment units there. 36 of them are under the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. The city invested $22.9 million of TIF in the project through a pay-go note, and then we executed a recapture agreement whereby if certain market conditions exist, we'll recapture a portion of that subsidy. And then in November of 23, Oxendale's Market actually occupied the space, but unfortunately their tenancy there was very short-lived, and they ended up leaving the space in February of 24. And so McGuff has been working with Jones Lang LaSalle, or JLL, to market the space. Do you want to go to the next slide? And we kind of covered this, so let's maybe go to the next one. Thanks. Okay. So the current grocery recapture agreement as structured outlines kind of two different recapture structures. We're only talking about the structure for the grocery space. We're not talking about if a sale of the building occurred today. So that current agreement between the Port and BCS4 Housing LLC, so that's the development entity under McGuff that developed the building, includes a recapture for the grocery space. And that was based on a 3-step waterfall that did a calculation on earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that's what's on the screen here before you. Next slide. So since that space was vacated, Port staff alongside McGuff and our consultant with Ehlers reviewed the existing recapture agreement to determine if potential changes would be beneficial in securing a new tenant for that space. And then based on those conversations, the proposal that we're bringing forward is to allow for a potential tenant that McGuff has a letter of intent with, or if that does not go forward and result in a lease for a new tenant to occupy that space under these new terms. So the changes focus on simplifying the recapture agreement so that that space is more easily marketable and the agreement is more easy for a new tenant to understand. And realistically, it's about removing the 3-step waterfall calculation that was based on that earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization to a base plus bonus rent. So it's a little bit more simple there. And then it does provide for a 2-year stabilization period so that new tenant has stability in the space before they have rent payments that are being incurred. And then finally, it does provide for sharing in benefits through that bonus rent if their sales exceed expectations. Next slide. So this is a lot in one slide, so maybe I'll kind of summarize it here. So it's changing to a base plus bonus rent structure and also removing the business reserve as a result of that stability period, so that 2-year stabilization period, plus that low base rent to allow a new tenant to be stable and financially feasible in the space. The costs that they would be incurring during that period would be specifically related to their operating expenses for things like common area maintenance and their portion of property taxes, but they wouldn't be paying rent until year 3 of the lease. Additionally, the bonus rent would recapture the additional revenue if sales exceed those tenant projections. As we learned with Oxendale's, the amount that sales actually ended up being was substantially less than expectation, so it allows for that base rent, but if those amounts do end up exceeding it, the ability to recapture some of those funds. And then finally, there was a fund that was used for reserve funds that would eventually become funds that would be available to McGuff. We're proposing to remove that fund and then allow them to collect those funds via rent payments in years 3 through 7 until the end of the lease term. And with that, I'd like to open up to any questions you have about the presentation or the proposal. Johnny Meeker is here from McGuff as well. And then he doesn't have a formal presentation, but if you have questions for him, he's happy to answer them. Otherwise, the motion is depicted on the next slide that Marit's going to turn over.
Well, thank you. Again, this is something that we all had high hopes for that would take longer, and they just didn't last very long. And one of the things that I was somewhat optimistic about, having been involved with the food business for a few years, is that once you put a food store in, the fixtures are very expensive, but they aren't worth much if you take them out. And it looks like this whole arrangement is, on the part of McGuff and everybody else, is one that is trying to give the new operation the maximum chance to succeed, which is what we need to do. And of course, one of the things that's critically important is that a lot of us thought that there wasn't much of any effort to really solicit the people that lived in the buildings around there when they opened the store. And so hopefully there's a full plan. So we can either ask questions of Kevin, or I don't know if we want to have Johnny come up and just say a few words about it, and maybe give us an update too on how the leasing is going at the project, and then have further questions.
And if you don't mind, while he's coming up, so the intention now is they have a letter of intent with a potential tenant. And what we're trying to achieve here is to allow them to execute a lease with that tenant if the terms are acceptable to the Port Commission. And I'll turn it over to Johnny, and thank you.
Is this
Welcome, Johnny.
okay? Hi, everyone. Just wanted to make sure this was on. Thank you for having us today.
And Johnny actually has some lineage with the city. Your grandfather is a very prominent citizen. He's retired now, but he started Goodall Manufacturing and several other companies. So
Yep. So we have a history. To start off with Carbon 31, leasing's going really well. From everything we've been told by our property manager, Cushman Wakefield, we are top of the market. So we're really excited about that. Additionally, Backstory Coffee recently opened, and they've been doing well, drawing more visitors into the area. We're hopeful that this new tenant will draw more people in. This grocery store we're working with is a Latino market with a grab-and-go option and quick service dine-in. And they're also a destination grocery store. They have client lists or shopper lists that show that, with zip code studies, that show that people drive tens of miles away. So rather than just being your local normal grocery store, we're hoping that this really is a destination and drives people in, and additionally having that quick service amenity. I was working at Carbon 31 last week, and the number of people that are getting Grubhub or Uber Eats just delivered. So having that grab and go option feels like it's a really good fit. And then just going back to something Commissioner Erickson said, or President Erickson said, is that the marketing that these Latino grocery stores, like, they're a very smart operator. They really understand that you can't be passive. You have to get out there and make your space really known.
great. Mr. Hunt?
Quick question that I had is, and I heard from not tenants in the building, but businesses in the area, particularly the office park, was there wasn't any marketing. And gee, we're all captive people, and those that went there, liked it, and then it was disappointing, and then it quickly closed. So just, the comment again about the marketing needs for, again, the businesses around there. And the other thing, the quick question then beyond that is I hear not just for the tenants in the office park, but people coming from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And I've zipped by there so many times, but is there really easy parking right there?
So there is,
Right.
yep,
So people that are non-residents can just zip in and grab something?
yes, they can. There's about
Is it
34, 35, very easy, I guess what's the proper term? Nose in street parking stalls
Okay.
that are right in front of the main entrance.
Perfect.
So, and yes, we are very cognizant of the marketing, and we've heard the same thing. And even when the Oxendale's closed down, our property manager is telling us, like, even with the big closed signs, people were, shaking the door, trying to get in. Maybe after it warmed up a little bit, people are out and about walking. So, from my understanding, winter's a tough time to open a grocery store.
Makes sense. And it's a frequent question that I get. What do you know about the grocery store? When's one coming? And so that was exciting.
Yes.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Luntz?
Yeah, I'm just looking for information, maybe a little elaboration on the third paragraph. It's the second sentence. The main interested parties were local destination cultural grocers that cater to communities metro-wide, not just in the South Loop. So it sounds like that could be a code language for an ethnic grocery store. I'm wondering whether Engelbrecht's is opening a second location off Lake Street in Bloomington.
So yes, that would be code language. The grocery store we're looking at is a Latino market or Latino serving. And this isn't my normal train of business, but my understanding, and we've had discussions with them, that people want to buy a certain type of food that isn't necessarily stocked at, your Cub or your Byerly's, and they travel for it and they make a day out of it. And then they'll typically grab dinner or lunch there while they're there, which is also an additional draw to get people into the store.
Does this tenant have other stores?
They do.
Okay, so this isn't a pioneering operation.
It is not.
You're going to continue to have a baseline of regular grocery products, but there's certain meat cuts, for example, many Latinos like thinner slicing on beef, for example, and certain items in other items in the perishable area in terms of spices stuff and peppers and things like this. So it's really an augmentation of that, and one of the things that Commissioner Hunt would be wonderful is if we have a parking problem, because that would mean that we're getting customers there, and it would be a nice problem to have to solve. So, Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple quick questions here. So it's a 15-year agreement. Does that basically restart the clock? Was the original one 15 years and this restarts that? There's the 7 years and then from what I understood, the recapture portion of the last 8 years. Am I understanding that correctly?
President Erickson, Councilmember Nelson, so that term that you're referencing was part of the original agreement with that reserve.
Okay.
So that's the funds that would be held for performance of the tenant. We're proposing to eliminate that in response to a lower base rent plus a 2-year intro period where they're not paying rent. And so that no longer applies. What we're looking at now would be a 7-year term for the recapture, which is consistent with the existing time frame. We did evaluate possibly looking at an extension and determined that that didn't make sense based on the existing framework, and instead McGuff incurred some costs that they are effectively not recapturing themselves through this process.
Okay. And then one of the other things is there was a $675,000 that might come back to us, but that's now going to McGuff. Am I understanding that correctly?
The 675 that you're referencing is that reserve that would have been held for the tenant if they needed to draw upon those funds. And then at the end of that term, if they didn't, McGuff would be eligible to receive those dollars. So effectively, the change is removing that that fund that was held in reserve, allowing them to access those dollars as they're earned, and instead providing for a low rent payment that the tenant has to pay.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then, in terms of the overall recapture, based on what you're looking at, obviously, the first one didn't work out. We're all very helpful for the second one here. But it's the same recapture amount. So the city had a recapture expectation up to 50%, hopeful for that. That remains the same, that's what we're looking at, and the data, based on what we know today, supports that we would recapture that 50%. Is that, or we could recapture that 50%?
President Erickson, Councilmember Nelson, you are correct that that amount is the same, so that has not been changed. Based on market conditions and what we saw, it's unlikely that the city would capture up to that amount. The performance showed that there may not have been a recapture whatsoever, and obviously with there being no tenant, there's not ability to do a recapture. So part of this is trying to get a tenant in there and create a structure that allows us to do that and potentially have a smaller level of recapture. We do have some numbers based on kind of some different projections, and I will share it as lower than that. But if they do perform well, then it's potentially a recapture amount of about $600,000 at the end of the term for the city.
So we could potentially recapture a little bit less than we had the max amount, but that was not guaranteed, or we could recapture nothing.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the
Commissioner Bussey
information.
and then Commissioner Luntz.
Thank you, Mr. President. So kind of building on Commissioner Nelson's question here, I understand the changes were necessary considering the failure of the first of Oxendale's and the difficulty in bringing someone in. But if we laid the original agreement side by side with this new recapture, just briefly and at a high level, the big changes and ultimately what the cost differential will be. Basically, what is the cost to the port and ultimately the city to make these adjustments necessary to make it so a grocery store could potentially succeed in this space?
Mayor Bussey and President Erickson, so the cost to the city is the cost of effectively administration and making changes to the agreement, but I think the question is related to the recapture amount that we're potentially losing out on. So the amount, and I've got it in a number of sheets here, so let me see if I can find that specific amount. The original projection showed that the city was expecting a recapture amount of about $1.4 million. That was based on Oxendale's expected sales based on the study that they expected, and they underperformed that significantly. So the numbers that they really sold at is what we're now looking at. And based on that, we're looking at potentially no recapture or a very small amount of about $20,000. If they were to perform at the level that the Oxendale numbers were at that original estimate, we would be looking at a recapture about half of the amount than that 1.3 million. So the 600,000 I referred to earlier.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Luntz?
Yeah, on the last paragraph on page 31, the last page, second sentence, the structure provides the tenant a low base rent after a 2-year introductory period with free rent and takes into account, okay, I was just wondering, this is a 7-year lease, there's 2 years of free rent, now they're going to be paying a low base rent beginning in the 3rd year. Does that step up then for the remaining 5 years, or is that just fixed versus the overage rent percentage participation rent that the landlord would be getting?
I can answer that. President Erickson, Commissioner Luntz. So the rent would increase at 2% a year, and then the bonus rent is based on a 4% calculation over that rent amount, looking at their net sales amount.
I didn't quite hear that at all. Is it stepping up? The rent's going to start in the 3rd year, and then is it going to step up for the remaining 5 years then, or is that fixed? Is that 3rd year rent fixed versus the participation rent?
So the third year rent starts at that low rate and then increases at 2% each year.
Okay.
And then one thing just to consider is they do have the common area maintenance cost and their share of property taxes cost. So when you look at the total cost to the tenant, it's kind of higher than that base amount that you're seeing. But it is still at a low value compared to some other numbers we've looked at.
Grocery stores pay low rent. They always
Yep.
do.
Other questions, comments? Well, Johnny, I mean, I think, I know I really appreciate it, and I think the rest of the commissioners appreciate how hard you've worked to get something done, and this obviously has not been a moneymaker for McGuff, but it is, I think, so important. It's transformative, really, to what we want to do out there, and I know you've shared that vision and stretched to do it the first time, and now stretching again, so we appreciate all those efforts. So if we have no other questions or comments, there's a motion on page 29 to accept these, which I would entertain. Commissioner Luntz?
Yeah, I have one follow-up question. I was just, they're going to have there's going to be a drive-up window did I read that? There's going to be a drive-up window for customers to come pick up groceries? And if there is, how's that going to work? I mean, how are you going to pull that off physically?
Commissioner Luntons, excuse me. No, there's not going to be a drive-up window, but there will be a grab-and-go option for quick-serve food and takeout. So they would park, get out of their car, and then go pick it up and pay at the cash register.
Thank you.
Anyone care to make the motion then? On page 29?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Keller, seconded by Commissioner Luntz. Any further discussion? Please call the roll, Marit.
Erickson,
Aye.
Bussey,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Keller, Peterson.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So thank you very much. We look forward to getting that open, and hopefully we have a parking problem.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is then local housing aid proposal.
Yes.
You're going to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Marit pulls that up. So the local affordable housing aid usage, you may recall we had a conversation about that between Council, Port, and HRA on December 10th. That was a session where we were soliciting feedback about the best way to use those funds given the limited resources that are available. This presentation is basically sharing the information that was received during that meeting and then providing a staff recommendation for the proposed uses that went before HRA last week, and then we'll be going before Council on the 3rd of March. Let's see if I can get this clicker working this time. Before I leave here, whenever that is, I'm going to get this to work. That's my mission. Do you want to go to the next slide? It must have worked. Okay. So just a quick overview, local affordable housing aid. So it's from the Metro sales tax. This was passed in the 2023 legislative session, and its eligible uses are specific to affordable rental housing and affordable ownership projects. And so that was what we evaluated as part of that session to determine how do we fund those projects and where are those priorities. Bloomington received just over $500,000 in 2024 and is estimating about $1 million annually going forward in each next year. The discussion themes from that LAHA conversation in December focused on really how do we make use of a limited resource when there are so many challenges. So that was the biggest takeaway, was that there are more needs than there are resources, and the result of that is staff looked at how to use the funds and made a proposal based on those different needs. So that proposed use is before you, and it is splitting the funds in 50%. And those funds would go, like I said, they went before the HRA for approval on February 11th. And then the intention is to go to council to authorize the HRA to administer those funds on March 3rd. The proposal has 50% of the funds going for affordable ownership projects within the city, and then the other 50% of funds going to affordable housing development, preservation. The structure of this would be consistent with how CDBG funds are administered in the city itself. And with that, I'll open it to any questions, and then Sarah Abe, who's our HRA administrator, is here as well if there are any additional questions for her.
Thank you. Well, this is an information item, so I thought that session that we had on December 10th, the joint session, was a very good session. It was interesting and went through. So questions for Kevin? If not, it's Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, so I just had one very specific question. Under the affordable housing, it was mentioned about Southview Estates, which I believe is on Lindale. And I just wanted to know if that is consistent with the Lindale area redevelopment plan that we have in place that we're trying to execute in that area.
That's a great question. Councilmember Nelson. Sarah, do you happen to know the answer to that question? It looks like we may not know the answer to that question tonight. We'd be happy to follow up with that at a later date. Great, thank you.
President?
Yep, Commissioner Pressey.
Thank you for this, and I agree. It was a good discussion. I thought we had a good discussion, and I think this captures the discussion very well about how the conversation went. How did we put a time frame on this? Did we say are we going to review this in a year? If, for example, something strange happens at the federal level, and I'm just throwing that out there because that's a possibility, and something happens. Are we able to change on the fly to adapt to changing circumstances?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioners. So the current proposal has it being the agreement between the council and the HRA being reviewed and approved annually. So we could, at the very least, approve annually. And then should things change at the federal level, I'm assuming assuming that those haven't been delegated and spent to a specific project, then we could be nimble as needed by the circumstances.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we have flexibility.
Yep.
If the need arises.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you for raising that issue because it's been bouncing around the back of my head for the last, 3.5 weeks now. And I had a nice chat with her, Ms. Mazik, about that. And I am reassured that our staff is keeping abreast of the circumstances and providing for nimbility, if that's a word. So, but let's all, I believe we have to keep an eye on this because the things are ever changing fast. So thank you for raising that.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Well, thank you both, and I guess we can move on to the next item, which is the appointment of our bond counsel. I see Julie sitting out there. So, Holly, are you going to handle these? Okay. It's interesting. I volunteer doing taxes several days a week, and I was telling Julie that I sit next to the husband of one of her partners. So I had a preview of what this was all about. So, Holly.
All right, good evening, President Erickson and commissioners. This evening you have two items before you, one for bond counsel and one for general counsel for a 120-day contract with Kutak Rock. I believe that is how it is pronounced. Our general counsel and bond counsel, Julie Eddington, who was previously at Kennedy and Graven and has served the Port Authority for a very long time, has transferred over to that firm, and we have the option to continue to work with her on a 120-day term. We'll be recovering our records from Kennedy and Graven, and then we will be performing an RFP for both services. The HRA and City Council have taken a similar action. So what we are asking you to do tonight is to allow us to enter into that 120-day contract, and then we'll go ahead with the RFP from there.
And Holly, can you refresh my memory, or Julie, how many years have we had Julie representing us. It's a long time.
I started with, oops. I'm just I started with the City of Bloomington in 2011.
Okay.
And I've been doing the work ever since. The development work and the bonding work.
Well, and I think, as Commissioner Keller would appreciate on that, with the complexity of everything we're dealing with, it's the continuity in this thing has been critically important because it's very difficult. So, thank you. Commissioner Hunt?
Thank you. I was on the RFP interviewing committee with a number of firms, back with the former city attorney for the council and former Commissioner Amy Grady. And we interviewed all of the different firms and overwhelmingly came back with Kennedy and Grave and Julie being the most appropriate for our needs. And that's proven
Great.
time and time again.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I would then entertain a motion. It's on page 43. Approve appointment of the bond counsel for, I guess you said, Holly, 120 days. Is that?
That's correct.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Peterson, second by Commissioner Hunt. Martin, you want to call the roll?
Erickson,
Aye.
Bussey,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye. Aye.
Keller, Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. The motion carries 7-0. So then we have another motion on the general counsel.
So moved.
And I will second it, and then if I could ask a question, Mr. President. So, just so I'm clear on this is for interim for 120 days and then goes out to a full RFP to figure out where we go next. Is that correct? Okay. For both the bond counsel and the general counsel services. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded.
Erickson,
Aye.
Bussey,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Okay, the next item then we have is the adoption of the Port Authority Economic Development Strategic Plan. Holly.
Yes, thank you very much, President Erickson and commissioners. Mart, would you please bring up the EDSP? Thank you. So as you all may recall, this is a long time coming. This project started before I arrived at the Port Authority. For the last several years, the City Council has been really raising economic development as a priority for the city. There was a study done between the HRA and the Port Authority in 2022 to really look at the strengths of each organization. And there was a decision made to have the port actually expand from its constrained geographic area in South Loop and then move citywide. There's also desire to see the Port Authority start to offer a wider array of economic development services. Specifically coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of interest in business assistance, looking at small business support, building those relationships. But there are a wide array of things that economic development services can include. So as we've been doing these expansions, it was recommended that we do an economic development plan with a consultant team to really guide us moving forward. So in 2023, we allocated the funds to do that. We had a facilitated session internally with staff, colleagues across community development, legal, finance, to really look at what would a plan like this need to guide our work moving forward. We put out that RFP and then we selected TIP strategies to work with us, and we began the work in earnest in 2024. So tonight I'm going to share with you the results of that plan. We are asking you to adopt the plan. There are additional documents and tools that come with this plan, but those are meant to be malleable and change over time. This is the primary document that we are looking at tonight. All right, and so we'll be going over the context, which I just did. as well as the process itself, the plan structure and action plan, and then we'll talk about next steps and then request adoption. So the project goal, as you know, was to create an economic development strategic plan for the port to guide and prioritize the port's work as it expands services throughout Bloomington. And that means geographically as well as that wider array of services. And the planning process was quite robust. Our economic development consultants brought with us their own strategies for how they do this. They used local insight. They met with community leadership and staff, including all of you. We had focus group discussions as well as stakeholder interviews with our partners, roundtables, workshops. They looked at data, and then they also used their own experience. So in the plan, we have a number of best practices and case studies included as well. They also looked at some of our past plans and incorporated some of our future plans to, in particular, include Bloomington Tomorrow Together, which is the city's strategic plan that was adopted in 2022, and that included the priorities of equitable economic development and a connected and welcoming community, both of which are very relevant to the Port Authority's work. And then the citywide creative placemaking plan, which is being completed right now in parallel, and that integrates efforts to build a thriving and livable community, and you'll see elements of that plan incorporated into this one as well, as creative placemaking is very much a part of our team. We had 18 in-person meetings. We had a steering committee that met 6 times, all of those virtual engagements, and then over 130 participants. And something that was a little different about this plan versus other plans that you may have seen come through the city is that we really focused on the business community. So it's people who own or operate businesses here rather than focusing on the residents. They are still very important. We want to create a livable community for them, but we really wanted to get the business perspective for this plan. Those are the members of our steering committee. We had everyone from Yusuf Ali from the Zawadi Center to Bahua Yang Hoffman from Health Partners. Really tried to get a wide variety of large and small companies, as well as real estate developers like Mark Fable from McGuff. Some themes that emerged from our planning process, including equitable growth, meaning across the entire city and all types of different businesses and employees that may work in them, looking at small businesses, which we were already doing, thinking about supply chains that might connect to some of our emerging industries like semiconductors, of course, looking at our real estate and entrepreneurship and innovation. And moving from that, they did create for us the Economic Development Strategic Plan. It's built on a few elements, including our economic vision statement, which is different from a mission statement, which I will come back to, our guiding principles, and our action plan. The vision statement is that Bloomington is a leading economic center in the region, fostering innovation, supporting local businesses, and enhancing the quality of life for all residents through equitable strategic investment and sustainable development. And that is meant to inspire what we do and really bring us together over the idea that Bloomington is a leader and that we are an economic force in the region. Even though we're part of the Twin Cities, I know Jamie liked to call it the Tri-Cities or co-opetition. He had a number of phrases for this, but Bloomington intends to be a player and be known on its own. We have a few guiding principles that we can always come back to as we make decisions around the plan. Inclusive and equitable growth, again, making sure that everyone is considered when we create programs and that our programs intentionally reach all types of audiences. Sustainability, both environmental and economic resilience. Collaboration and service. Collaboration is very important to us. As we do our economic development work, we do it with a lot of partners, whether that's DEED, Greater MSP, Hennepin County, Next Stage. We cannot do the work that we do by ourselves. We need that expertise. We need that cooperation. And then service came from the staff. The Port Authority staff take a lot of pride in the customer service that they are able to offer to businesses coming through. And we really want to elevate the reputation of Bloomington as a place where it is easy to do business or open a business. So we incorporated that. And then accountability is to make sure that we are tracking everything we do with this plan. And we ended up with 8 objectives that I'll go more into detail in, but they include traded sectors, which also means large business, small business, innovation, which also means entrepreneurship, thriving places, which to us is, if we're going to do economic development work, let's grow a place where people want to be. Real estate and infrastructure, talent attraction and retention, wraparound services, and marketing and events. So each of these has strategies incorporated with it. I'll try to go quickly, but with those large employers, this is a real focus in a way we haven't quite been able to do it before on business retention and expansion. That means visiting our large employers, and Mayor Bussey, you're going to feature prominently in a lot of these photographs, so just get comfortable with it.
I'm not wearing the same thing in all the pictures.
So this is visiting Toro, but making sure that we accept invitations to these large events, that we are annually visiting our large employers, as well as making a point to visit key industries, key commercial nodes. We visited 15 of our larger employers last year. We also tracked the news, so when we heard of new businesses coming to town like TKDA, we could be the first people to reach out and welcome them. Business recruitment is something we do with our partners at DEED and Greater MSP. When we get a site selection inquiry or an RFI, we are moving quickly to see, is Bloomington the right place for this business? Is this what we want here in Bloomington? And making sure we can respond. And partnerships, we've mentioned them many times. We have a number of partners that do this work with us. Small business is something we've been growing for the last 2 to 3 years under the leadership of Barb Wolf, the Assistant Port Authority Administrator. We're offering very direct support to businesses now and advocacy. We are doing some really hands-on work to help people get through the permitting process. We're planning to have an annual business forum. We're also looking to streamline our permitting process. It's an ongoing project that we are doing, but we have our colleagues across community development on board with us and looking at perhaps at a buy local campaign. Innovation is entrepreneurship. We have spent a lot of time over the last year and a half studying the small business landscape. Who are the players? Who are the funders? How do they work together? We intend to do the same thing for the entrepreneurial space, which is a little bit different. Small business is meant to serve local markets, but entrepreneurships are meant to grow and expand beyond the borders of Bloomington. And so that is something we are excited to spend time on.
I'm happy to see the mayor in a different costume there.
Yes.
Do we underwrite his wardrobe? What's that?
You don't want to know about that one.
It keeps getting stuck, I'm sorry. All right, so objective 4, thriving places. Again, as we mentioned, we work closely with our placemaking team to make sure that the places that we are trying to economically grow are also livable, connected, green, that they have public spaces associated with them, and that even the commercial areas, like our commercial nodes, are attractive and people want to walk into them, spend time in them. We've already started doing some of this work through our facade grant program, and we will continue to focus on this. Creative placemaking is also undergoing its own its own strategic planning process, which will move its capabilities citywide. So we look forward to working together. And then real estate and infrastructure. Real estate, of course, is the bread and butter of the Port Authority. This is what the Port Authority really built itself around. And so we'll continue to offer those development services, as well as assist with affordable housing development alongside our colleagues at the HRA. Begin to look at land banking in strategic ways. We're going to be building that strategic acquisitions fund this year, and then support infrastructure expansion like sewer capacity and other critical needs for growth here in the city. Talent retention and attraction. This is a somewhat new area for us. Talent-focused promotion, something that the state has been doing with its new Star of the North campaign, and something that we are hoping to do a little bit of with our colleagues at Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism and other marketing partners. Why would people want to come to Bloomington? Why would they want to stay in Bloomington? Partnering with our educational institutions to make sure students know that this is a viable place to work and live. And we've already started doing some of that work with the Bloomington Economic Partnership, which was the mayor's workforce, what was it called? Council?
Workforce partnership.
Partnership, that sounds good. And also making sure our talent want to stay. So part of what we do when we do these business engagement and visits with our large employers is share with them some of the opportunities at the city, whether that's volunteerism or the Learn to Lead program, making sure that people feel connected. Wraparound services, of course. For employees to thrive here, they need to be able to feel supported, have the training they need, potentially have childcare here and housing here, and be able to get to their jobs. It's not all of those things are so simple in a distributed suburb like this. And so these are all areas where the port may not necessarily lead, but we want to be connected to the players in this community that are working on these problems. One example might be that Greater MSP is hoping to gather a group to do a childcare feasibility study to especially support high-tech manufacturing where there are 24-hour shifts. And that's something that the port could play a role in, whether that's financially supporting or making sure they're connecting to our employers so they can give input. And finally, marketing and events. This is another thing that we've really started to build up with our communications team here in Bloomington. They have done a great job pitching stories about the city, and it's beginning to pay dividends. This is a recent Finance and Commerce article about Bloomington having multiple sites with strong development prospects. And they've allocated $90,000 for an RFP to do consulting to really promote the economic development prospects here in Bloomington. Events, the world can really be our oyster. It could be an industry event around the semiconductor industry. That's something that we imagine comes over time, probably not in the first year or two, but something we'd like to work with our partners at Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism on. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are additional elements to this plan. You've all received the executive summary, which is just a 2-page document that you can quickly refer to or share with others about this plan, what it is that we're doing, why we did it, what's the greater context here. We have a staffing plan that we also shared with you. This is also meant to evolve over time, but you'll see it's pretty similar to what we have structured already. We have our workforce development coordinator in here, or Son's position as the Bloom facilitator. It's a temporary position, but we hope it becomes a permanent position. And then down the road, we are considering adding a project facilitator or perhaps a communications specialist to the port. That is to be determined, but we don't want to grow too fast. The port has already grown significantly in the last 2 years, but that's something we may consider as we move forward with this plan. And then the implementation matrix. This is a tool that was built for us by TIP Strategies. This is a matrix that has each of the objective areas, all of the partners that we'll be working with, and when we plan to start initiating this action, whether it's in 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12, 1 to 3 years, or 3 to 5 years. We'll be tracking the status, and this is something we'll be using as a team regularly to look at the tasks that we are doing. And it's flexible. We did not want this to be set in stone. We want to be able to react to market conditions. The world is changing very quickly, and we may need to adjust over time. There also, I will say, there will be an online dashboard that we'll be able to build. We'll be given the tools to do so, but community development is currently undergoing its own process of gathering data and deciding what data it wants to report on. So that's something we want to do in concert with community development to make sure that we are working together. Yes.
Yep.
As we look at that last template you had, who's going to be updating that? Who's tasked with monitoring it? Who's tasked with having ongoing discussions with that?
We'll be updating that as a team, and monitoring that as a team will be, the goal is to look at this quarterly, but that might be ambitious. It might be an every 6 months type of thing, but we would like to bring it to the Port Authority. It is a lot to take in. So I think we need to work on a way to streamline it and just show you what is a priority for any given year. And I think that's something that bears more thought, and I think it will matter. We can have ongoing discussions about what the Port Authority Commission thinks is important and what you all would like to see reported on regularly.
Well, I think you somewhat anticipated that with, you said you're going to have a dashboard or something, and the logical thing then would be to have this link to the dashboard and look at it. But I mean, again, we look through this, and there are so many individual items that you're talking about that it gets to be difficult to communicate about each one and talk about them, and also it's a matter of prioritizing and making sure that we accomplish the things that we want to accomplish, that you want to accomplish, and the city wants to accomplish. So I think that's going to be a very important part of the process, and it's one of the reasons why I want us to take some time if we need it on looking at the work plan and think about how we can interact and look at that.
Thank you, President Erickson and Commissioner Hunt. And yes, I think over the next 5 years, we will work together very closely to refine what that process looks like. It is a large amount of information, 8 objectives with 2 to 3 sub-bullets underneath them, and underneath that, it's a lot to work on. So we don't have it perfectly planned yet, I will admit it, but this is something that we're looking forward to working on together. So next steps include, this evening, we'd like to ask you to adopt the Economic Development Strategic Plan. And then in relation to this next session, which we may discuss having in The Hague instead of here for easier discussion, we'd like to discuss and approve the Port Authority mission statement. We have gone through several drafts of that with our consultants and have one that we'd like to propose to you for discussion. From there, we look forward to celebrating the Economic Development Strategic Plan and sharing that with stakeholders in February and March. And then we're looking to finalize that implementation matrix that you saw, at least the first version, by the end of March, by the first quarter of this year. And then we'll be syncing that new online dashboard with data that emerges from our prioritization in the implementation matrix, as well as data that the community development team is identifying as important as well. And that will happen over the spring and summer of this year. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah. Thank you. I just have 4 very slow questions. Can you remind me of what traded sectors, how you define that and what you look for that?
That's a good question.
Absolutely, yes.
That's why I did it slowly.
President Erickson, Commissioner Nelson, Commissioners.
I've already asked her several times privately, but.
Okay.
Traded sector means that it is industry that can be sold outside of the boundaries of Bloomington. But the easier way to think of it is our large employers, our Toros, our semiconductor manufacturers, and also professional services that can be sold outside too.
Okay, thank you. Along those lines, just a comment. As the plan further develops and goes along, I hope we focus in on the industries we want to focus on and not try to just be everything to everybody. We have a really good base already, and we should really focus in on where we can make the most. And I think there's some other supplemental information in terms of where people are employed and stuff in this report. But my comment is don't try to be everything. We've got some great industries. Where can we expand those? Second thing is, so in Objective 5, there was a housing market, talked about affordable housing. Objective 7 talked about housing a little bit more broadly, but then referred back to affordable housing. What consideration, or I guess just a comment, you can answer it if you want. My opinion is we should be looking at all types of housing, because as we look at different things, we're trying to bring in good jobs for people that they can live on. We want good houses that they want to live in too, and not affordable housing is absolutely critical, and I'm very supportive of it and has been, throughout my council tenure. We also need housing for people that don't need that affordable component, that want to be here because we've got the most amazing park system in the state. We want to have a reason for them to be here and make sure we have that housing for them. So that's just a comment. And then Objective 7 about the wraparound services. 2 points on that. Look at how we can partner with our schools. The number one determinant of where a family moves is the school system. And whatever we can do to support our local schools here will benefit everything we do in terms of workforce. So I could have gotten into the talent retention and attraction too. Last one is look at the other departments in the city, Park and Rec. I think one of our biggest opportunities is either youth and or amateur sporting type things. We've got great parks. We've got we're renovating big. We've got the ability to attract these types of events. And candidly, I don't know where else you'd want to go other than Bloomington, with the Mall of America, and having brought my kids to many places, having a place like that where the sibling has stuff to do while the other one is playing is an amazing opportunity. I think it ties in with some of the conversations about, an event type of complex. So maybe I'm not supposed to say that out loud. I don't know. And then the other one is comms, work with our communication department for public relations and let the world know that this is Bloomington, Minneapolis, St. Paul, not the other way around. So I bring it up every time someone brings up Minneapolis, St. Paul, like you forgot one, the most important one. So those are my comments on it. I think it's overall really good. I know it's like any other type of document, it's going to evolve and get flushed out, but those are kind of my comments on what I see in the draft here.
Commissioner Keller?
I would like to echo a couple of things. I flatter myself that I've been a consistent supporter on the affordable housing front, and manifested similar sentiments when it comes to how we look at the return we get on certain investments, expenditures, sales, developments, what have you. Having said that, I do agree with you that we need to consider all types of housing, and I suspect there's a relationship between our tax base and the various economic strata of homes, residences we have here, and I don't think we can support one without the other, or shouldn't support one certainly without the other, but I don't think we can do all of that, any of that separately and be successful. So I don't think I've heard anyone but you say that, and not that we're perhaps all thinking it at the same time, but I think that is really an important point to make. And it particularly rolls into the school system, I think, having put kids through school here, as I think most of us have. So kudos on that, and I hope we keep that in our individual minds as that moves forward.
Other comments? I just like to comment on the school thing, since I've been heavily involved with that too. Bloomington School District, because we have, especially on the east side of town, many lower income people, test scores tend to reflect somewhat the economic circumstances. If you look at Bloomington's schools and segregate the data or separate the data by economic strata, Bloomington schools do very well. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is really tell people that they have an advantage to come to a community like Bloomington that has a multiplicity of people of different backgrounds, different areas, and it's really a marvelous introduction, and that our schools will perform as well as anybody given the income disparities that we have. And if you look at high-income people, their students do very well. So it is one of those things, I think, that's a challenge, and I've been harping on the superintendent on this for years, because we just want to use aggregate data instead of disaggregating. And sometimes it doesn't tell all the stories, so it gives us something that, and I would agree that it's really important in locating. So, Commissioner Peterson, you've been sitting there very quietly, and you usually have some very thoughtful comments. Do you have any?
No, I think the discussion around kind of the schools and housing in our community is a really important one. The thoughts that I had in general kind of on the plan is I like the fact that we have kind of a broad plan like this. In the past, we haven't had a really kind of something at this level. And so I'm excited about the plan that's been put together to start to apply it. The one thing I think about on it is that because it's so broad, I think we're not going to be able to make progress in every single area. And so as we start to apply things, we're going to have to do a little bit of picking and choosing of things that we end up working on. Some of that will be the marketplace or the community picking and choosing things for us to do as opposed to us doing the picking. But I think having a plan like this that's considered things from a variety of directions is a really useful thing going forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Keller?
Actually, to bind all that stuff together, the thing I like the most is that we restate our principles. And I agree with you, Mr. Peterson, Commissioner Peterson. And I think we will have to make choices. But when you have first order principles to look at least that those decisions can be made in light of those things. It's always been a point of frustration for me in politics that people seem to be very flexible with their principles, depending on whose individual oxes are gored or pampered. And I think we can't have a successful plan like this without starting with this, regardless of how hard it is to meet those goals. So, again, blindly agree with you.
Commissioner Christie?
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, thank you. Congratulations on this. This is fantastic work. And thank you to you and to the folks at Tip Strategies. I think they did a great job with this, and we're great partners with this. I really appreciate the robust work behind it, that it just wasn't a start at what should we be doing, but rather a real thoughtful process of looking at what we have, where we're short, where we might benefit, and to bring the group together that you brought together and to bring them along with the meetings that you had and the discussions that you had with all of us, and I know with the council and so on. I think it really formed a great foundation for this entire plan, which I think is outstanding. And Commissioner Keller beat me to it. The guiding principles, I think, are the light, the searchlight for this entire thing, just to keep it focused on what we're trying to accomplish and to use the principles. I used to work with somebody where principles were the main thing in any plan that we had. And I learned very well from that if you focus everything around the guiding principles and keep coming back to them as you work through the objectives, as you work through the strategies, as you work through the individual specific kind of work that you're looking at doing, if you can keep coming back to the guiding principles, it's just it's a huge help and a huge anchor for the entire plan. So,
and if I interrupt, I'm sorry. Goals and principles are not necessarily the same thing. Goals are in service of principles, and I think sometimes we collectively, humanity, can lose sight of that.
No, agreed. So kudos, well done on this, and well done to your entire staff for their work in putting it together. Extend our thanks to our friends at Tip Strategies, because I know they were a great benefit to this, and looking forward to putting this into action and spreading the word on this, because I think it's an exciting document. Well done. Thank you.
Well, speaking of that, any other commissioner comments? Otherwise, I would entertain on page 45 of your package, there's a motion.
Mr. President, I would move to adopt the Port Authority's Economic Development Strategic Plan.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Keller seconds. Any further discussion? Mart, do you want to call a roll?
Erickson?
Aye.
Bussey?
Aye.
Hunt? Nelson? Lunds?
Aye.
Keller? Peterson?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Okay. So we have, the next one is in our annual report. You know, Holly, I'm just looking at this, and I think the financials and budget adjustments is a fairly short one. Could we just reverse the order and do that one next, and then, because I really want to make sure we have an open-ended discussion on our annual work plan. So if anybody has an objection to that, we can just move the budget adjustments up and do that.
President Erickson, that is fine with me.
So why don't we do that?
Good evening. Tonight I'm going to go over the two budgeted funds for the port, which is the general fund and the port development fund.
Thank you.
So we'll go over the preliminary 2024 amounts. They're not final yet since the budget isn't final. And then I also have a motion for some budget adjustments. Okay. So, looking at the Port General Fund, just as a reminder, the budget for 2024 included 850,000 transfer in for the operating and 853,000 in operating expenses. So pretty much breaking even at a net loss of 3,817. If we look at the preliminary actuals, the transfers from the South Loop Fund for operating was 760,000. And the reason it's less is because the operating expenses were also under budget, so we did not need the full transfer amount. The next item is a transfer in from South Loop for the sick ramp. And just as a reminder, the sick ramp total budget was around 18 million. Half of it was to come from the city's South Loop.
For whatever reason, it's not coming up on our screens here.
Oh. I don't.
There it is, back.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I... So do you see the general fund now?
We can see the general fund budget there now.
Okay. So up in the revenue section, in the preliminary actuals, there's 8,239,000 coming in for the sick ramp. So half the sick ramp is going to be paid by the city's South Loop Fund, and the other half is coming from the port's TIF funds. And so from talking with our auditors from Redpath, since the port will own the ramp at the end of it, their suggestion was that we transfer in the money from the city's South Loop Fund. I didn't touch anything. And then pay all the expenses out of port, since port will be the owner. So that transfer in of 8 million is offset by the capital outlay expense for the sick ramp. So that's basically the city's portion coming from the South Loop Fund. Also up in the revenues this year, we started to allocate interest to both the general fund and the port development fund. In the past, any cash balances would have been pretty immaterial, but with the development fund growing and with the transfer in for the sick ramp, there was more of a cash balance, so we started to allocate interest to both these funds.
Interest rates have also gone up a little bit, which helps.
Yep.
Or hurts.
Yep. Yeah, the money market is still earning 4.5%, so it was definitely a good year. So then when we go down to the expenses, you can see the salaries, wages, and benefits was under budget by 154,000. And that's because the budget makes some assumptions about how employees will allocate their time in the next year. So those assumptions would have been done in May of 2023. And so a lot can happen between 2023 and 2024. So if you think about the water park, for instance, if that project had moved faster, there probably would have been more time coded here. Instead, staff ended up spending more time on general city activities. So when we get to the development fund, you'll see salary expense is over budget there, but it's offset by being under budget in the general fund. Material, supplies, and services was under by 30,000. And then once again, the sick ramp had expenses of 8.2 million. So for the general fund, our budget adjustment request is to approve the operating transfer in for 8,239,000 and to approve a capital outlay expense for the sick ramp of 8,239,000. And then looking at the development fund, the budgeted revenues was 1,545,000, and the budgeted expenditures was 1,894,000. Revenues were pretty close to budget. Property taxes came in just a little bit under due to delinquencies. But then with a little bit of interest revenue, the total revenues was just under budget by about 3,000. Looking at expenses, once again, due to employees allocating their time more to development fund, salaries were over budget by 95,000. All the other categories are either at or under budget. Materials was under by 26,000. There's still a final invoice for the 5-year economic plan, so that was under by about 3,000. The small business center costs were all under. The development project grants was under by 100,000. And then the facade program was also under by 64,000.
And I just want to point out on here, we've had a lot of discussion about this small business center, and you can see 2 items related to that. So it's my understanding that the small business center has been put on hold, or whatever the best terminology is for it. And you see that the plan for the center lease has been removed. So at any rate, that's something, those funds will be available for other uses.
And to add to that, I believe there is going to be a request to the City Council to return that $300,000 for the small business center construction. So that $300,000 that was transferred to the city for the construction possibly will be coming back to Port.
Well, I'm sure we had some expenses for architects and engineers and stuff and things too, but at any rate, so thank you.
So based on the actuals compared to budget, our budget adjustment request for 2024 is basically reallocating some of the unspent budget for the small business center and materials and reallocating that to the salaries. And then we're also asking to carry forward some of the unused budget to 2025. So overall expenses were under budget by $291,000. We're asking to carry over $219,000 to 2025. And that includes $60,000 related to the new Bloom facilitator position. It includes the $45,000 for a business retention program. It includes an additional $50,000 for the facade program. And then it also includes the $64,642 that was underspent in the facade program.
And that Bloom, we had a presentation at Rotary, but you know, I think if they can accomplish their objectives to arrange internships and things with the major corporations and things, they're just getting started. There were some, I don't know how many there were last year, but at any rate, it's something that does exactly what we're talking about in terms of trying for all business levels actually to bring them in and do something. So we get our young high school students and maybe even some college students, I don't know, that can participate with that.
And that position is actually being split 50-50 with community development. So the $60,000 is just the port's portion of that expense. So, and so then part of the request is to move that carryover amount of $219,000 to 2025. So this is just a summary of what the 2025 budget currently is and what it would look like if the carryover amounts were approved. Any questions?
So those are the sum total. You've got another. Is there another budget, or these are all the budget adjustments you're reflecting? I mean, we're going to have one motion to adopt the budget adjustments you're proposing, correct?
Yep.
And they're
So
listed.
then on here, this is just a summary of all the adjustments that came from the 2 slides before that we looked at.
So questions for her in terms of any of these budget adjustments? Commissioner Rusty?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for this. So as I look at the facade program, which I understand the goals behind the program and how it's being used and so on, but I see that there was $64,000 that was unspent, carrying that forward, and then adding another $50,000. And so for next year, I'm looking at, so this year the $150,000 for the facade program, $64,000 was unspent, so we bring it forward, and next year we've got a facade program budget of $264,000. Do we really believe there's going to be that large of an increase in the need or the demand for these facade program dollars?
Well, part of the reason it was under budget in 2024 is just the timing. Barb has been working with businesses, and they're identified, they just don't have the work completed yet. So some of that is just timing of the facade, but I'll maybe let Holly answer more specifically about the detailed plans.
Thank you.
Yes. Mayor Bussey, President Erickson, commissioners. So this program actually proved very popular. We had 150,000 allocated originally, and then got another 35,000 from Hennepin County. And we exceeded that amount in demand, and so we reallocated some other funds from, we had a bucket for unspecified grant funds, development grant funds, so we allocated a little bit more. And we actually ended up committing 233,000 overall to it in 2024. And so this coming year, we had 150,000 committed again and a $50,000 grant from Hennepin County. They increased that grant amount. And so, as Mary Kay explained, we're just rolling forward to account for the money that hasn't been expended yet, but it's been committed. And so over time, we're going to be able to have a better model to show you how this is going from year to year, because we do anticipate this particular account kind of flowing in between the years in a little bit of a confusing way. But that is what happened, and it has been very popular. And if it continues to be popular, we may look for other funding sources or increase these funds.
Well, I think that's an exciting program. And I mean, again, we're dealing with a lot of small businesses, and if they can get some help, so it might even be worthwhile just trying to have a presentation at some future meeting where we could go and even on future tours or whatever as we go around town, it might be interesting just to see some of these locations and things, because I mean, it's been a major effort to try to make the city development accessible to all in terms of all sizes businesses, and that was kind of the genesis behind the small business center, but there's other ways that you can accomplish that. So, thank you. Other questions, comments? If there's not, there's a motion on page 127. I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off, Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You have 4 short questions? Or?
4 short questions. I actually have no idea how many questions I have this time or the length of them. So let me moderate. Let's go with moderate. So are we increasing the number of staff in this? Because if I'm understanding this correctly, the staff costs are going up $95,000.
For the development fund, yep. And that's because of how they allocated their time.
So then in the other one, it was lower.
Right.
So, okay. So
Yep.
there's not an increase of staff.
No, each pay period, the employees allocate their time between the TIF funds, the general fund, development. And that's based on how they're actually spending their time. And so sometimes how they're actually spending their times differs from the budgeted amount.
Okay. And then we are carrying over the facade that the mayor spoke about, but also the Bloom position and things like that. I don't know that we need to have this conversation right now in terms of approving this, but at some point we should have a conversation in terms of policy that if we don't spend the money, I don't know that we carry it over. You know, I think we have to look at that budget and go, do we need that money for the budget? And then we budget for it the next year as opposed to carrying it over. And that's not a Port Authority issue exclusively. I think that's an entire city issue. Again, I think it slows this down at this point in my mind, but I think it's a larger conversation as we go forward on that, just because, you know, we had a position not filled for part of the year and it didn't cost as much. I don't see the reason in that case to carry that money over to the next year and use it for something else. So,
Sure.
Just my position, or at least it should be discussed.
I've got a comment on that, because I think when, Mr. Chair, if you want to recognize me.
I'll recognize you, Commissioner.
Okay. Yeah, I think, to follow up on Commissioner Nelson's comment, I think we want to encourage the behavior if there's a planned expenditure, and from a timing perspective, it doesn't end up in the right fiscal year. I think we want to be fairly kind of easy to move money from fiscal year to fiscal year, because if we're not careful about allowing that on a routine basis for kind of a particular expenditure, just from a timing perspective, it puts department managers in the position of kind of use it or lose it for spending money, and I think it encourages the wrong sort of behavior. At the same time, I think Commissioner Nelson brings up an important point that If money is unspent for purpose A and we're going to carry it over in order to expend money for purpose B, that really is kind of like a annual budgetary conversation. And I would support Commissioner Nelson's comments around that in terms of wanting to treat that a little bit differently than like expenditure, different fiscal year moves.
Well, we get into this difference between business accounting and fund accounting, and I never have been a big fan of fund accounting. I've overseen for many years, but that's one of the things that you end up getting into, because when we create a budget in the public sector, we actually move money. It goes into that bucket and is there available for expenditure, as opposed to in the private sector, a budget is nothing more than a plan, and you just gauge yourself against it. So I think somewhere in between the two is the right attitude. I mean, again, they need to be monitored, and we need to have accountability. But at the same point in time, a lot of that just goes with making sure we've got good explanation of what we want to do and why this has occurred. So we can have a future discussion. That could be another principle that we could have. Mm-hmm. Other questions, comments? If not, we have a motion on page 127 of your package, which I would entertain. Motion made by Commissioner Keller. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bussey. Any further discussion? Mart, do you want to call a roll?
Erickson.
Aye.
Bussey.
Aye.
Hunt. Nelson. Lunds.
Aye.
Keller. Peterson.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. And I think the way you presented this was very good. I mean, again, it's you got to strike a balance between detail and everything else. But I think your slides and everything were pretty explanatory. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Holly.
All right, good evening, President Erickson and commissioners. And if I may, I'd like to just take this opportunity to compliment Mary Kay, who joined us in 2024 and took over from Jan, who'd been doing the accounting for a very long time. She has done an exceptional job at learning these accounts and getting up to speed and suggesting improvements. So I know you haven't seen her that much up here yet, but I just really want to compliment her and take that opportunity. All right, so with that, I would like to move us on to the annual report and the work plan. And some of this may actually help you make some sense of what you just saw in the budget. They are a little bit, well, they're very related. And I will hope this works. All right, so annually, as you know, we like to present an annual report of the work that we accomplished in the previous year, as well as a plan for the coming year. As we were working on this plan, we were also wrapping up the 5-year economic development plan. So we tried very hard to sync it with the economic development plan and the priorities therein, but it's not in that format yet. So just forgive me, it's organized more how you've seen it organized in the past. But just for a timeline, again, of the context of the way the Port Authority has been changing. In 2022, there was that HRA assessment that really identified that the port should move citywide and take on economic development and development work, while the HRA could focus more on housing and small development work. 2023 was the first year that we expanded formally, and we were funded by a transfer from the HRA levy. And it was the first year that we were able to offer small business assistance in a meaningful way with a dedicated staff person. In 2024, we imposed our first levy, and we did our 5-year strategic plan process. And then in 2025, this coming year, we now will have our 5-year economic development plan to guide us. We are also funding reserves, as this is a new funding source for the Port Authority, and we'll be seeding a strategic acquisitions fund with our levy. So there are some big changes to think about as we move forward. And as a quick reminder, the port has grown about 15 times in size in a very short amount of time. It used to be just centered around the Mall of America, expanded to South Loop, which is that orange triangle there, and we now work citywide. So with that, we've had to adjust quite a lot with the services that we offer. with the headcount of staff that we have, and with creating plans to help guide our work and working more with communications to tell our story. We mentioned previously that we're really trying to work in a focused way with businesses of every size, from small businesses to large businesses. We are offering direct services ourselves, like navigation through the permitting system and advocacy through our system, as well as grants like the Facade Improvement Grant or Hatch Bloomington. But a lot of the services that we are offering are also partner referral services, or helping people apply for state grants or federal grants. So we created this continuum just for a quick reference guide to show all the different ways that we are working with businesses, and it's something that we'll continually update. In 2024, we were working under the previous, it's not exactly a mission statement, but guidance of providing economic development for the city of Bloomington. And we were guiding ourselves with the Bloomington Tomorrow Together priorities of a connected and welcoming community and a community with equitable economic growth. We'll retain those into 25, but those were our main principles in 24. And we worked in the 3 areas of real estate and development, business assistance, and creative placemaking. Some of the general things that we were focused on included the 5-year economic development strategic plan, really sharpening our partnerships with some of the groups I mentioned earlier, including Indeed and Greater MSP, communications and outreach and marketing, continuing things like our broker breakfast, going to ICSC and having our first ever MinCar booth, and then providing that service and assistance in a concerted way. In real estate and developments team, there were some great announcements as far as business expansions went. Polar Semiconductor was actually the first company in the nation to officially announce its CHIPS award, and Skywater had a preliminary announcement at the end of the year. MOA Water Park got its preliminary redevelopment agreement term sheet approved in April, and we continue to look at that project. Europolis expanded. SICK continued to build its ramp and look towards future phases. Bloomington Central Station continued to speak to us about their future phases. 700 American broke ground, and we started the process of building out a TIF management plan, which is something that used to exist for the Port City and HRA, sort of fell by the wayside, and is something that we are picking up again. So there will be one place where you can see all information about the TIF districts here in Bloomington. The port has also been working on affordable housing. We oversee the OHO as far as amendment goes, as well as compliance. We support the HRA in analysis and execution of affordable projects, and we've been working with them, as you just saw the presentation, to evaluate the local affordable housing aid funding options. In business assistance, we've really been growing out that program this year. Elevate Hennepin and Open to Business both offer free consulting hours in all types of different genres, from legal to marketing to leasing. And they have offered over 1,000 hours of free consulting to over 90 businesses here in Bloomington. It's very impressive. CEO Start is a free cohort program that we are doing with Hennepin County. We've had 21 businesses go through that. The Facade Improvement Grant Program, you heard, committed $223,000, which is leveraging over $5 million in improvements, so that's been a significant impact. The Planning Division's been working on streamlined development review and improved business codes and processes. We have built out our ribbon cutting and groundbreaking protocols, so you should all be getting regular invitations to these types of events. And we started a conversation about transitioning our small business center brick and mortar concept to the Small Business Development Center, a concept that will be offering services without walls. Small Business Development Center is a part of the SBA, the Small Business Administration. It's programming that is replicated around the country. Here in Minnesota, this team works with the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and they want to have an office here in Bloomington that is going to be an office without walls. So I'll tell you more about that coming up. In administration, we continue to work on building relationships and on our business retention. And I thank the mayor and the former city manager for spending a lot of time with us, going out to visit new businesses and welcome new businesses. There is Wilderness Inquiries shovel shot right there. As I mentioned, TKDA is bringing 300 employees here as well, and we continue to keep an eye on those moves. We updated the bylaws for the Port Authority Commission. We had a number of hires and transitions. Kevin's been doing a great job coming into his role as Assistant Port Authority Administrator, and we are going to be having 2 new staff join us within the next few weeks. And we continue to improve processes, especially with Mary Kay's help. In 2025, so that was our annual report. So now looking forward to 2025, a number of changes are coming, and we are starting to integrate all of these new projects and priorities together. We have just adopted our 5-year economic development strategic plan, so we'll be utilizing that guidance as well as the tools within the plan to start focusing our work moving forward. We'll continue to reference Bloomington Tomorrow Together and the Creative Placemaking Citywide Plan, which is about to be brought to City Council. We'll also be referencing the Economic Development Plan and vice versa. We've also been taking on new responsibilities. I mentioned some of these in December when I presented. We are bringing in some of the workforce development work that's been happening here at the city into the port. So that is why Bloomington has been coming into the Port Authority as an economic development effort and to support our employers and our youth workforce development. We are going to be focusing on commercial nodes and creating a toolkit for businesses and property owners there. That was a project that originated in planning and is moving over to the port now. Hatch Bloomington started as a project to give a $100,000 prize to a small business that wanted to open a brick and mortar here. We are also going to be playing an integral role in that as well. The project is led by Sean Lundy. And then Bloomington Economic Partnership, that is a quarterly meeting of businesses and higher educational institutions and other partners interested in workforce development and economic growth here in Bloomington. And so the port's going to be playing an advisory role there as well. That's also including a CEO summit that will be happening on February 27th that the mayor will be leading with some of our largest employers here in Bloomington. And we're going to be building out a fall business forum as part of this series as well. Messaging and communications remain important. I mentioned that we'll be working with our communications team on releasing an RFP to give us assistance in our economic development promotion, and then we'll continue streamlining operations and service and working on reporting and data alongside our colleagues in community development. In the real estate and development realm, as I mentioned, commercial nodes, we'll be working on disposition of the Ramada site and continuing to support SIC through project management, working with MOA on their projects, and we are hoping Bloomington Central Station continues to be active. You just got that grocery store presentation. We'll be bringing the 98th Street Station site with Metro Transit and Met Council back up to the forefront of discussion, and continue to help administer the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and LAHA and OHO. I mentioned we will be working on the TIF management plan. We hope to get that concluded this year, and then we'll be working on updating that every other year with our municipal advisors to make sure that everyone has that information very easily available. Grant administration and business subsidy administration are ongoing processes, and then it is our hope this year to develop some streamlined packets for when we are responding to site selection inquiries. In business assistance, we'll be onboarding some new staff, continuing a lot of our advisory and referral services. We're hoping to explore a new direct assistance program to help with the city SAC fees for our smallest businesses, and then continuing to work with planning and B&I and others on internal process improvements and policy. And then their biggest 2 projects this year will be that Small Business Development Center partnership. So we will be offering matching funds to the SBDC. Minnesota Deed and St. Thomas is involved as well, and we'll be building out business programming with them that can be offered throughout the city. Our first partnership in this program was with the Zawadi Center, and we offered a program there, and over 150 people attended. So we're finding a lot of luck and impact in bringing the business programming to different audiences and tailoring the programming to those audiences rather than trying to get people to come to us. When we have events here, 10, 15 people, maybe 25, when we go out to the community, we see numbers like this. So we're looking for different partners in the community to help us. There will be one-on-one consulting, there will be workshops, and then there will also be cohort programs as well for businesses that want some longer-term advising. The business assistance team will also be implementing the CRM this year. We selected a system called Executive Pulse, and that will be helping us track all of our interactions with businesses. And workforce is a new area for us. The Bloom and Bloomington program, we're bringing that into the port. So we've been helping with employer recruitment, and some of our new businesses have been great in jumping on board. TKDA will be hosting, as well as Wilderness Inquiry. Polar and Seagate will also be hosting interns. We have about 30 spots now and over 77 interns that have applied already. So it's oversubscribed. It's very popular. If you know any employers that would like to host a young person, please let us know. We're also seeking outside funding right now at the legislature and through grants. And then Warsan will also be working on mapping the workforce ecosystem. It is quite complicated. There are a lot of partners to get to know. And finally, in administration, we'll be implementing the economic development plan, working with you on the update of the mission statement. We continue to work with the legislative team here in the city on priorities for the city, specifically around economic development, cleaning up our files and archives, very exciting stuff, and then staff management, professional development, and making sure that we are working with community development on data. And with that, I mentioned at the beginning, the team has grown quite a lot. I believe for a long time, the port was 2 to 4 people at a time. We are now at about 10. And you can see the full chart here. However, they could not all be here today, but I just wanted to show their photos to remind you who you're working with. We have a great team. They are very excited about the work they get to do. As I said, they were the ones that asked for service to be one of the guiding principles of the Port Authority's work moving forward. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge them. And with that, I will take your questions.
Questions, comments? We're silent?
I'm exhausted. I can't imagine how tired.
Well, and that's why I said, I had talked to Holly, I said, with all these things, I said, you know, we may be in a situation where we maybe just want to think, I mean, and we also could approve this, then just say, you know, we would like to have continuing discussions, so there's different things, different ways we can proceed. Commissioner Luntz.
I know what I would like. Your last two exhibits here, you had the chart of the staff positions and then the people with the scorecard. I would like to get the scorecard program with everyone. The last two exhibits you had here.
Oh,
everyone's faces with
correlated with their names.
Right.
Oh, I was Commissioner
Well, I
Lenz. I
can
was
do
wondering
that.
what you wanted me to
But
score
there's
them
two
on.
Exhibits. One has the people's pictures and names, and the other, because there's been a lot of staff changes.
Absolutely, yeah, we'd be happy to provide that.
Okay, well, what's the pleasure of the board? What would people like to do?
I think it's called a plan, and I think that sort of inherently involves adjustments as things change. I suppose others might feel other ways, but I don't think it's a manifesto, and I don't take it as a mandatory step-by-step program. I think it's a little higher level than that, and so I feel like we could bless it, and as with several things we've talked about here, keep our eyes on changes in the environment and circumstances and make the appropriate adjustments. Does that seem reasonable?
Do I take that as a motion?
Sure.
And I will second that, Mr. President, if I could, and to agree with Commissioner Keller that a plan is a plan and it can work. And I think we also, yes, it's a big plan, but we also have to remember it's not 2 to 4 people anymore. This is a good sized, robust team and a very talented team. And to be honest, they're doing a good chunk of this already. A lot of this is to grow and expand the work. For example, the outreach to the business community and the work that we're doing with the support and the facade program and so on. And they're doing it already, and to push it forward, I think to be even bigger and better is something that this group can do. I've got confidence in them, and I think Holly's put together a good team. And with new folks coming on board as well, I think we turn them loose and wouldn't mind updates quarterly or so.
Okay.
Just a check-in, see how we're doing, and see how you're feeling about things and how we're looking. But I think it's definitely an aggressive plan, but it's also a plan that has been a long time coming, and I'm glad to see it, and glad to see we're pushing it forward, especially the 5-year development plan.
Yeah, I spoke with Holly briefly this morning. God, it's not been that long in this meeting. Earlier about a concern I have about current state of play in Washington and how that might affect us. And I'm not searching for a word that isn't surprise. I was pleased to have my feeling of the quality of both her work specifically, but the staff in general, of anticipating things that might require some changes in direction. And I think we should have that confidence. And I do think it's back to the discussion about what's a principle, what's a goal, what's a plan, and what's an implementation of a plan. And, there's an old military aphorism about plans are what you have until the first minute you engage with the enemy, and then everything throws out the window. So I just don't think we can require, or would it be a good idea to require any further level of detail, because then we'll be subject to someone saying, well, okay, but you said on June 13th, you take a left-hand turn at 30 miles an hour and you went at 29 miles an hour. And what the heck's the matter with you people? So.
Well, this is clearly an iterative process, and we'll have to continue, and we need to develop, as has been said by several commissioners, we're going to have to prioritize, and that's something that Holly has to communicate, and I think if we have a dashboard or something. So, Commissioner Peterson, you're sitting there quietly. Any put you on the spot?
Commissioner Keller and I oftentimes think the same way. It's the act
Sorry.
of building a plan that's a useful thing, and then as you get into it and begin to execute, sometimes it turns out to be true and sometimes not. I support what's being proposed.
Okay, well, any further questions, comments, or discussion? We have a motion that's been made and seconded. You want to call the roll, Mart?
Erickson?
Aye.
Lessy?
Aye.
Hunt?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Lunds?
Aye.
Keller?
Aye.
Peterson?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So, I think we don't have any further items on the agenda. Or Holly, you have something else?
President Erickson, I have a few brief updates, but I will need to plug my computer in again to get them. But if Mayor Bussey could give me an assist, I was hoping to do a commercial for State of the City.
Ah, yes. Remind me of the date? March.
I have to look.
Coming up in March will be our annual State of the City address.
Oh.
And you're all invited. Hope you could be there. It's I can't recall the date. If anybody can come up with the
I
date,
think it's the
you win,
26th or
especially-
something.
It is online.
21st, March 21st.
Online.
It is online, but you know what? It's much better in person, Commissioner.
I would love to go. I want to go for years. We're never here.
Well, okay. So it's a good show, and it's a good opportunity to learn and actually to be representatives of the city for the business community that's going to be there. We have a lot of city folks who are there, but between the chamber members, our business community, we are extending the net far and wide this year in terms of the invitation and the personal invitations that are going to go out and the follow-up phone calls from the mayor to make sure that we get people there that we want them to hear the story about what we're doing in Bloomington. And so if you are here in March, please do join us at the State of the City address, and I can guarantee it will not only be informative, it will be entertaining as well. The few things we've got planned, I think you're gonna enjoy. So. Mm-hmm.
Is it watchable live online?
I believe so. I believe it's live streamed, but I cannot say that for certain. I've always been there, so I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you. Mayor Bussey? 21st. Definitively March 21st. We can send you all the link to sign up
It's
after.
at the Radisson Blue, I know. So.
A few other things. Commissioner Keller had asked me about federal funding earlier today. At this time, the programs that we presented to you, other than some of the expansion funding for CHIPS grants, is all state or county or local funding. So at this point, we are not concerned. That may have some impact on the HRA, but right now we're being advised to wait and see on a lot of these things. We've checked in with Polar. I haven't heard any changes. There are other companies that have been applying for tax credits and other programs. They did not get them, but again, it's just a holding pattern, wait and see at this point. If we learn things, we will share them with you. At the state level, we have a few pieces of legislation that we are pursuing or following. We are looking for a public purpose extension on the Ramada site. It had the 9-year economic development tax exemption, and so we're looking for an extension on that because of Expo held it out of development for so long. And then the mall and others have been pursuing an extension to the spending plan TIF deadline, which would have come at the end of 2025, as well as some clarification for how interest that has been earned on spending plan TIF accounts could be used. And so that should be advancing soon.
And I think as many people probably are aware that if the 25% tariffs on Canadian imports remain in effect, go through or whatever, that has a dramatic impact on the cost for the water park. So that's another issue that has come up that
As will
makes things more
labor,
difficult.
to the extent labor is exported while we're charging people more to import things.
We are also pursuing $300,000 in workforce appropriation to support the Bloomington internship program moving forward. And then on a lighter note, we'll have 2 staff joining us in March, and so we'll hope to introduce them to you at the next meeting. That's a business assistance specialist and an economic development analyst. And finally, as I said, keep an eye out for invitations to openings, ribbon cuttings, tours. We're getting a lot more involved with that lately because the chamber has not been able to offer those types of services as easily here in Bloomington. And so the port has been picking up some of that as well, and it's been well received. And now we have all those beautiful photographs of the mayor cutting giant ribbons. So that's it. Those are my updates.
Well, let me just say, I know that I'm going to be in Brazil, touring the Amazon on the 18th. So I won't be available any way, shape, or form. And so let's make sure you get to Mart and make sure we have a quorum.
Okay.
For that particular date. And
Get your shots.
I'm sorry?
Get your shots.
I have one more thing. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. And this was an invitation from the creative placemaking team. They're going to be starting to put together panels to select art for art boxes and give feedback on murals. And I know that some of you have expressed interest in that in the past. So if that's something you'd like to participate in, please let me know and I will connect you to them.
Great. Anything else?
That's it. Really it.
Okay, we are adjourned.